Okay, this is a case that broke a couple of weeks ago. We're going to play catch up right now and kind of go through the case, brief on it from the beginning until this point where we're at. This case here, it hits very close to home for multiple reasons. One being it is in Alabama. It's Mobile, so it's quite a distance from me, but it's still Alabama. And two, from what I have witnessed and listened to so far in this case and read, this is quite possibly another case that was failed by the Alabama DHR. And those of you that's been with me for a while are very well aware that I have very much been an advocate about the Alabama DHR and how they do desperately need a revamp. But anyway, this is the Johnson family. The father being named Derek, the mother Nancy, and then there's 2-year-old Jacob and 5-year-old Mia. Now, if you haven't heard about this case, this is being said to be a murder, and you know the word I'm going to say because you just can't say it on YouTube. Basically, the dad came in to the home and found the wife and the children deceased. The children had been drowned, and the little girl had her throat slashed. The mother was also deceased. So let's look at it from beginning until current point, which is today is October the 13th, and we're going to brief on some of it up until this point, and then we're going to continue to follow this case. Nancy Johnson drowned her 2-year-old son, Jacob Johnson, and her 5-year-old daughter, Mia Johnson, in the bathroom. She also slashed her daughter's throat before she hanged herself. The children's autopsies revealed that both died from drowning, but Mia's blood loss due to her knife wounds contributed to her official cause of death. Derek Johnson, who was separated from Nancy, is also the father of Jacob and Mia. Jacob shared in a note on their GoFundMe page, which I will link down below. This GoFundMe was launched by Derek's sister. His sister says that he is devastated and horrified at the thought of returning to the bathroom where his children were murdered. This GoFundMe was launched 3 days after he discovered the bodies of his wife and children. So this time there is $17,588 raised of a $25,000 goal. Okay, so let's listen to a few of the news clips and also the press conference. And we're going to try to catch up from the time it happened until current, and then we're going to be following this case very closely.
It's 2 babies.
Sheriff Paul Birch struggling to comprehend how anyone could kill 2 children. Heartbreak felt by neighbors who knew 6-year-old Mia and 2-year-old Jacob Johnson.
Oh, probably heard the kids, huh?
Birch says the children and their 37-year-old mother, Nancy Johnson, were found dead this morning in their Semmes home.
At this point, we can't say whether, she's been murdered or not. That part's still under investigation.
Birch described the scene as gruesome and horrific. He believes Mia tried to defend herself.
I would say she put up a fight.
Birch says the children were killed in a different manner than their mother, but did not disclose how they were killed, only saying they had not been shot.
And they had both told me they were going through a divorce and was getting ugly and all that, but I didn't know it would go to this.
The estranged husband, Derek Johnson, filed for divorce twice this year, the first time in April. The couple reconciled in June, but he filed again for divorce in August, accused Nancy of leaving with the children, and petitioned the court to see her psychiatric records. Earlier this month, Semmes police arrested Derek for violating a protection from abuse order.
Several different times with the Semmes police officers. They've been in and out.
We've been over here numerous times for domestics, and she's called numerous times concerned for her children's welfare. There is an active PFA out of the state of Utah.
Delivering Covering the grim news today, a mother and her 2 young children found dead inside a house in Semmes. It happened on Evergreen Court, that's off Snow Road North.
And let me show you, the scene mostly has cleared now. This yellow police tape, all that really remains. Earlier there was a big police presence here. Mobile County Sheriff Paul Birch says that investigators are still trying to determine whether this is a triple homicide or a murder-suicide. Sheriff Birch identifying the mother as 37-year-old Nancy Johnson, her 2 children.
Okay, this is a clip from Fox 10 News on September the 28th, the actual day this happened.
Sheriff Birch identifying the mother as 37-year-old Nancy Johnson. Her 2 children were 2-year-old Jacob Johnson and 5-year-old Mia Johnson. A neighbor tells me that the family had only lived here for about 6 months and the police had been here several times. Semmes Police Chief Todd Friends confirming that officers had responded to about 6 to 8 domestic calls. He says that Johnson and her estranged husband both called police on each other during the past few months. Sheriff Birch says that the children died in a particularly violent way. He says that Johnson died in a different manner and says it's unclear whether she committed suicide or was herself a victim. Nancy Johnson's estranged husband reported the killings. There are 2 the 2 were going through a bitter divorce, and court records indicate that a judge just last week had granted Johnson's request for a protection from abuse order against her husband. The judge awarded the couple joint custody of the children, and he ordered her husband to retrieve a camper from the state of Washington. The 2 were to take turns living in that camper in the backyard and remain apart. Chief Friend says that the scene inside the house is hard to take, even for a veteran law enforcement officer.
Yeah, it's definitely not a typical homicide scene. It is more brutal than normal, than that what we normally see. So yeah, it definitely tests your character when you see something like this.
Sheriff Birch says that the children's father is not a suspect at this time, but this case remains under investigation.
Okay, with that initial media coverage, it doesn't sound good. There was multiple domestic violence calls. She had even had a PFA put out against her estranged husband. PFA, protection from abuse. I know in the state of Alabama for a fact that you have to prove, either by marks on your body, recordings, text messages, you have to prove that you are in danger to get the protection from abuse order and to get it signed and granted by a judge. So there has to be something to that. So it had been ordered that the husband go pick up a camper and bring it and live in the backyard, like for 1 week, I think is the way I understood it. And then the next week his wife was to live in the camper, and I guess one of them was to live in the house, but they were to stay apart. See, that's too close proximity, in my opinion, behind the house. I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, let's listen to a few more news clips. Also interesting, the dad actually contacted Law and Crime Network to give an interview. Now, he contacted them, not the other way around. And when he contacted them, it was only like a week after he had found his family murdered, allegedly. So let's listen to a few more clips and see where our mindset goes at this point.
And I'll just leave it at that.
And we understand that her estranged husband was living in the backyard in a camper.
Well, the camper's there. There's, I guess it could be public record. Y'all could see that there was an order issued that the camper be placed there if one or the other to stay in the camper, to be apart from one another.
And he found the scene?
That's what we're told, yes.
And is he a suspect at all?
I don't want to get into that yet until, like I said, it's still very fluid. We don't know exactly the cause of death of the mother yet. And until we find out more about that, I don't want to make that assumption.
Is the estranged husband being questioned? Where is he right now?
He's here on the scene.
He's still on the scene now?
Yes.
So would you say he's being detained?
No, he's the one that made the phone call, and he's here on the scene, but obviously he'll be questioned.
Okay, so is he considered a suspect in this triple homicide?
Until we know more about what caused the death of Nancy Johnson, I don't really want to speculate on that.
Okay, so you're confirming the names Nancy
Yes,
Johnson and
it's Nancy Johnson, the daughters Mia, and the 2-year-old Jacob, all Johnson.
Okay, and the estranged husband Derek Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. And you were saying when I walked up that the cause of death, you were discussing the cause of death?
Well, I was asked if there was gunshot wounds, and I said no, it was not gunshot wounds.
So were the victims stabbed?
I don't want to get into specifics, but it's horrific.
And you talk about horrific. Does that apply to the mother as well? I mean, was she in the same condition as the children?
We won't know the full extent of her injuries until we get to forensics and an autopsy is conducted, and but it's pretty apparent how the children died.
But she may have died a different way than the children died. They weren't all killed in the same manner.
That's fair to say.
And so at this point, it's still not determined if this was a murder-suicide or if this was 3 murders.
Right. We just don't know that at this point.
Okay. And if this is 3 murders, then the estranged husband is a person of interest.
That's fair to say. But again, we're not to that point yet. I will say he's been cooperative thus far. So.
Have you been in contact with any other family members?
I personally have not, but our detectives have talked with family of Nancy.
And do they have family in the area? We understood they had moved down recently from the north somewhere?
Yeah, the family's from Utah. They're from Utah, so that there are no family members locally.
And you've already talked about this, but you said domestic calls have already been made to this house. How many? When was this?
I would have to defer to Semmes on that. I don't know how many, but they're we're assisting them with this. It's obviously their jurisdiction, but they're gathering all the reports and the calls for service to this residence.
Could you talk to maybe her mental state? There's some indication in the court filings that maybe some psychiatric care she had to receive. Do we know much about her mental state?
I do know DHR was involved in some of the, filings and just domestic type situations, and that has been, we've been made aware that there's some possibility of some mental instability. But again, I don't want to, say that and not have it in my hands to be able to say what that was.
Mm-hmm. You've been doing this a long time. We're talking about 2 children deceased in that home. And you've been in there, and it's not a scene you could ever get used to when you're talking about kids.
It's 2 babies. All right, that's all I got. Appreciate it, Sheriff.
So as you can see, this was the sheriff on scene as the crime scene had just been discovered. They said the husband was still on scene at that time. He's not been considered a suspect. And yes, DHR was involved. They were involved because of, from the way I understood it, multiple complaints of domestic issues. You can see how the sheriff got choked up about what he had just witnessed with his own eyes with these babies. He's reluctant to say much because obviously the investigation is very much in its infancy at that point. But let's go on and continue to listen to a few more clips and put all of this together and catch ourselves up. Okay, the very next day, September the 29th at 1 p.m., the sheriff held a press conference, and as you can tell, he is still very much upset about this, and in my opinion, he's doing the very best he can to answer all of the questions the best he can, with this still being an ongoing investigation. However, when you watch this, I think you're probably going to get the same thing I'm getting from it. He has a lot of questions about a lot of things that's been said that happened in this case. That's how I'm picking it up. See what you think.
And the children were positioned on that sofa. They had been basically cleaned up in water, by being submerged. When the father found the children, they were covered with a blanket. And again, it was, the 2-year-old boy was immediately to the right of the door, and the little girl was a little further away on a, it was an L-type sofa, and the little girl was on the other part.
And did she, almost like she like clean them and then position, like wrap them in, you said a blanket?
Just a blanket laid over them. So.
Okay. And was there any note explaining her actions or any investigation, or through your investigation, have you uncovered any kind of notes given to people that would explain?
We have not recovered any kind of notes outlining what happened. We have learned and continue to learn that there was clearly some psychiatric issues with the mother. And again, we're learning more and more about that, as the hours go by.
And was she diagnosed with something, like, was she?
I can't say that she was diagnosed. There are some court documents and DHR type documents that, make reference to her mental condition.
And I know that her husband had asked for a subpoena for some psychiatric records as part of the divorce proceeding. Is that what you're referring to, or are there other things that go into more detail?
The ones I'm speaking of are documents from our local courts here. I don't know what he may have subpoenaed for his divorce proceedings.
Was she trying to set him up? Some of the neighbors we spoke with made statements that she told them, if anything happens to me, he did it. Was this some kind of revenge? She was trying to set him up to make it seem like he murdered his family?
I can't speak to someone's mindset of what their intentions were when, they're dead and we can't talk to them. But I will say that, she has some self-inflicted injuries as well, on her wrists and her neck. And I think she did make some kind of comments to neighbors that if something happened, it was probably him. And, but again, I can't really speak to her mindset and what she was trying to do.
And when you say, are there like older wounds, or that were inflicted at the same time?
Inflicted at the same time.
And so Derek is not charged with anything.
He is not. Again, even as of yesterday, he was cooperative, and we were able to corroborate some of the timeline of where he said he was and where he'd come from, and he was truthful in those statements. We were able to verify with receipts that were located, and it's just tragic, and unfortunately, and I hope this stops. There were a lot of social media comments about him being responsible, and that he probably did it. Well, he didn't.
Had she given neighbors a suitcase with a note and some cash, maybe, and alluding to if something happens?
She did. It was, I think, some clothing, a small amount of cash, her telephone, which was odd because she'd given it to them the day before, and some kind of note that, alluding to that something happened. It was probably her husband being responsible.
And this was to a neighbor, the phone and the cash and the clothing?
It was in a purple suitcase, yeah.
And to a neighbor and saying, if something happens to me, it's it.
Yes.
And you said you can't get into someone's mind. Obviously, you can't. But I mean, does that seem to you that where she was going with that? That this is
there are several, I guess, ways you have to look at it. Was she trying to make it, seem that he did something? Maybe, but also keep in mind she clearly was mentally unstable, and there, again, court documents making reference to her, having some mental issues.
And so, did he make statements, or is it your understanding that he was fearful that she might harm the children, and he was trying to get the children away from her?
He did have some concerns because of her behavior.
And they had a tumultuous relationship, obviously. The police department out there had been out there, I think, 6 to 8 times. They called the police at various times on each other. And she had gotten a protective order against him. How would you describe the relationship, and was that contributing to the mental issues, or the tumultuous because of the mental issues?
Well, you've pretty much answered your own question. Obviously it was a tumultuous relationship. They were going through a divorce. Both had local attorneys. There were some, I guess, court orders in place, and you know, anytime there's a situation like that, you know, there's always two sides to it. And I'm not going to speculate, you know, which one was at fault or, you know, causing the problems within the relationship.
Has she tried this before, like self-harm? Has there been a history of self-harm?
Not that I've been told.
Her family is from out of state, like Utah or Washington? Or
they're both from the Utah, Washington area. The husband, father, actually arrived Wednesday from Utah. And you know, we have verified that through security surveillance systems at areas. We were able to see where he, you know, arrived with the camper in tow, backed into the driveway. Again, everything he said we've been able to corroborate as, you know, him being truthful about it.
And that was the camper, I guess it was ordered by the court to get it so that they would alternate back and forth
with the children.
Yep. I believe there was just on the timeline. I believe that earlier this year she had filed for divorce against him, and then that was dismissed. They reconciled, and then he filed for divorce again. I think a day after the protective order. One thing I was confused about though is the protective order was actually signed in Utah by a Utah judge, but they were living here. Do you know?
Well, most protective orders are valid in any state. You know, again, we're still gathering a lot of these documents. You know, it was a time-consuming scene and a lot of interviews to be done. So, you know, we're still gathering documents, and we don't take documents from the internet to rely upon. We have to get them from the courts to make sure they're valid and haven't been altered in any way. So, you know, we were made aware of PFA being applied for in Utah. I don't know that it was enforced at this point, and you know, those are still questions that we're waiting.
Regardless of, you know, whether it's valid, I was confused about, if they were living here at the time, why she wouldn't have filed for protective order here, and as opposed to Utah. And I didn't know if you knew anything about whether they were sort of going back and forth or whether they've been here.
I mean, he clearly was going back and forth. You know, whether she was traveling back and forth, we really don't know.
Have you ever worked a case where a mother killed her own children and then committed suicide, or is this a first for you?
It's a first for me.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, this is really unusual for a pretty extreme case.
And what more is left in the investigation? Because obviously it seems like this is not something that's going to result in charges and a prosecution and having to get ready for a trial. I mean, are there still loose ends that you tie up just for the record?
There are some loose ends that need to be tied up. You know, there's some things that we've been made aware of that I'm concerned about, and I don't want to point fingers or speculate until we get some of the documents. You know, but I think that based on what I'm hearing, you know, it's highly likely somebody within the system dropped the ball.
DHR? Or, yeah.
Somebody within the system dropped the ball.
So, in your mind, because he's traveling back and forth, he's not there the whole time, but there are clearly concerns raised about her mental stability and the welfare of these children, and there are red flags here, and are you saying that these children should not have been in that home, that someone that should have taken these children from the home?
Clearly that should have happened. I'm more concerned with the timing of when it should have happened. And again, I don't want to, until I have the documents in my hands and able to analyze them, you know, with our team, you know, and we'll make a decision where we go from there.
What were your options on that? I mean, if you think someone in the system dropped the ball, I mean, is that potentially criminal, or what could you do with that?
It could be or could not be. You know, I'm not necessarily looking at it from a criminal aspect, but I'm damn sure looking at it to make sure it don't happen again.
And can we expect, since you're publicly raising this issue, can we expect a follow-up to what your findings are?
Absolutely.
Okay. How long do you think that would take to?
Just a few days. You know, we're up against the weekend, so obviously you're not getting much today. But I've already asked the detectives to start gathering some of these, you know, documents and most of their day, they just finished up with the autopsies probably 30 minutes ago. So, they're finishing up with search warrants and searching vehicles, and we have to release the house here shortly. And so most of their days spent already.
And then will the house be, because I know the crime scene tape's still up, at what point do you wrap it up at the house and leave?
Yeah, they're in the process of doing that now.
And then obviously there's a custody fight, between this couple. Did that play a role in this? Do you think that the battle over who would get permanent custody of these kids?
I mean, I think you could say that in any case. Anytime there's an issue with custody and then both sides are fighting for custody, it can be very volatile. And clearly, it was here, but I don't know who was filing for what type of custody. And again, we have some questions that are not answered yet that I plan on getting to the bottom of, and we'll circle back with y'all when I do.
And then this issue with the camper, the protective order in Utah specified, I think, 10,000 feet. So by that, it would seem that the camper could not legally have been just in the backyard. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about the protective order in Utah. Again, I don't know that it was ever made active. We were told about it, but don't know that it was ever validated by a judge. And the order about the camper came from a local judge here, and who has jurisdiction to make those determinations here.
And have you? I guess you have not yet had a chance to follow up with DHR or anyone else about sort of the systemic issues.
Well, I'm awaiting documents to. I want to see some paper right now. Before we start talking with people.
Where was she found in the house?
I guess you would describe it as a closet before you get to, like a master closet before you get to the master bedroom, and she was, that tied a scarf or something, or like a silk type belt around the rod in the closet and hung herself in there.
You said in their master closet, or in a closet before you get to
right before you get to the master bedroom.
So like in a hallway closet?
You could kind of call it. You'd have to see how the house is laid out. You've got a, slight hallway coming past the kitchen, and your bathroom's right here, and there's a small closet right here, and your master bedroom's right in front of that. So it's not a typical layout that
so a small hallway closet by the bathroom.
But I think looking at it, it was serving as a master closet.
Okay. Was it right across from the bathroom believed to be where she committed the murders?
Yes.
He does say that the husband hasn't been charged. He's been cooperative. He does say that, several social media comments have been made regarding him, but he says he didn't do anything. So some information, the couple had been going through a divorce, both from Utah, Washington area. So this happened yesterday. We were there at the scene where Mobile County Sheriff deputies and the Semmes Police Department responded to the house on Evergreen Court off Snow Road. Again, 2-year-old Jacob Johnson and a 5-year-old Mia Johnson were found brutally murdered inside their Semmes homes. The mother, Nancy Johnson, was also found dead inside the home. It's still, they're still gathering information. Sheriff Birch did say there's loose ends that need to be tied up. He doesn't want to speculate, but based off the info, he did say somebody within the system. And when they asked him, did he mean DHR? He kind of, made a face, but he said someone within the system dropped the ball. Some other information, we did look into some court documents which were filed in June. The children's father claims a DHR worker had told him children's safety. Other court documents also say the father was trying to get custody of the children, but just a couple weeks later, another court document shows the couple agreed to go to counseling instead.
So that was very interesting. A couple of things to bring to mind, as well as some things in this article I want to talk about. But a couple of things to think about is the sheriff did say that the husband didn't do anything. He didn't do this, no matter what's being said on social media. Also, The husband has been cleared of any suspicion. That was quick. And this press conference was the very next day on the 29th. So it seems like he was cleared extremely quickly. Now, my concern is still this PFA. He said he didn't know yet if the PFA had been granted by the judge in Utah where it was taken out originally. However, you're fixing to see in this article that it was indeed granted and when it was granted. Also, another thing that concerns me is the wife did go to the neighbors, told them she was worried. Another thing, 6 to 8 domestic calls to the home. All of this is very concerning, as well as, just like he said, someone in the system dropped the ball. That's how he put it. Obviously, in my opinion, he is alluding to DHR. DHR in Alabama, that's what it's called. It's not called CPS. DHR meaning Department of Human Resources. It's CPS. That's what it is. It's for children. So anyway, let's look at this article right here. The sheriff, as we just heard, said that we were able to corroborate some of the timeline where he had said where he was and where he had come from. So let me hit on that just a minute. Both of them are from Utah. Neither one of them had family in Alabama. That's a pretty long distance from each other, those states. So especially all the way to Mobile. Thing of it is, I would be interested to know what brought them to Alabama. Was it something he wanted to do? Was it something she wanted to do? Was it their decision together? Was it work? Very interesting to know what brought them to Alabama. But the sheriff said that the husband, Derek, was being truthful in his statement. I haven't heard of any polygraphs or anything, so I'm just assuming that he's going by the timeline. He said he did find receipts and everything to corroborate the timeline that he gave. So the sheriff went on to say that he hopes it stops with the social media. There was a lot of comments about the husband being responsible and that he may have did it, and then he just plain bluntly states, well, he didn't. So the sheriff said that the day before the killings, Nancy gave neighbors a purple suitcase with clothes, a small amount of cash, and her phone, along with a note indicating that if anything happened to her, her husband would be responsible. Although he did allude to some court records pointing to the mother having some psychiatric issues. And the sheriff did say, quote, was she trying to make it seem like he was going to do something? And the sheriff says maybe. But you also have to keep in mind that she clearly was mentally unstable. And, there again, court documents making reference to her having some mental issues. Okay, now, Derek and Nancy married in Washington State in 2016. And it sounds like their relationship was never really good. And there was allegations of abuse, a protection order, and there was even 2 separate divorce filings. Now, in a June court filing supporting the husband's attempt to win custody of the children, his lawyer wrote that a DHR caseworker expressed concern for Nancy's mental health. And the sheriff also went on to say that the children should have been removed from the home. So it's going to be interesting to see if DHR is held with any responsibility of what happened in this situation. I believe they should be, as well as many other situations. But you know what? Normally they're not. Normally they're never charged or even held accountable for anything. Russell Sellers is a spokesman for the DHR and told Fox 10 News that they are cooperating with law enforcement and they would have no further comment. See, Nancy filed for divorce in Mobile County Circuit Court in April. There was a 9-page agreement that was drew up later that month, and it settled the divorce between the two. But by June the 26th, 2 weeks after the husband's lawyers had expressed concerns for the children's safety, the couple had changed their minds. So, the Mobile County Circuit Judge, Walter Honeycutt, granted their request to dismiss their divorce case. The reconciliation did not last very long. Semmes Police Chief Todd Friend said Thursday that his department had responded to 6 to 8 domestic disturbance calls at their residence. Now, Nancy had asked a judge in Utah, where her and her husband and children had previously lived, for a protection from abuse order from her husband, Derek. And the judge did grant that request on August the 8th. But one day later, Derek filed for divorce in Mobile County, Alabama. And then Mobile County Circuit Judge Walter Honeycutt ordered that the couple share custody, and each taking weekly turns with the kids under DHR protective supervision. He ordered that Derek retrieve a camper trailer from Washington State, and then beginning on October the 1st, each parent was to take turns living in the house with the children for a week at a time, while the other one lived in the camper. And they were to swap these roles back and forth week by week. And before this custody arrangement even took effect, Nancy and her 2 children were dead.
What is clear are numerous court documents detailing a lot of trouble between the children's mother and father.
Mobile County Sheriff Paul Birch says Semmes officers have responded to several violent calls at the house.
Semmes is very familiar with this residence. They've responded to numerous domestics.
According to court documents, Nancy Johnson and her husband have been married since 2016 and filed for divorce earlier this year. It also shows that Johnson took out a restraining order out of fear for her life. Court documents show this month the husband forced his way into the home previously shared by the parties, causing damage to the home as he broke in through a window and physically attacked the mother and grabbed one of the children. Jail records show the husband was arrested. Semmes Police Chief Todd Friend says they've responded to 6 to 8 calls of abuse from both the husband and the wife.
The past several months, we've had a lot of domestic disturbance calls out here from the couple, just different domestic type calls, anything from harassment to physical.
The couple was from Utah and Washington and had only been living in Semmes the last 6 months. According to the sheriff, the husband had been living in a camper behind the house.
I do know DHR was involved in some of the, filings and domestic type situations, and that has been, we've been made aware that there's some possibility of some mental instability.
Now, Sheriff Birch says the father is not a suspect. He's the one who found the body.
Neighbors are struggling with the horror that unfolded yesterday at this Evergreen Court home in Semmes.
It's such a waste.
Mobile County Sheriff Paul Birch says autopsies completed today reveal 37-year-old Nancy Johnson drowned her 2-year-old son Jacob and drowned her 5-year-old daughter Mia, and also slashed her daughter's throat. Birch says the official cause of death for both children was drowning, and a contributing factor in Mia's death was blood loss. Birch says Nancy hanged herself with a silk-type belt around the rod in a hallway closet near the bathroom where she murdered her children.
When you enter the back door of the home, there's a sofa to the right-hand side, and the children were positioned on that sofa. They had been basically cleaned up in water, by being submerged. When the father found the children, they were covered with a blanket.
Nancy's estranged husband and the children's father, Derek Johnson, made the horrific discovery. Birch says he is not facing any charges. Court records show Derek filed for divorce last month. The couple was in a bitter custody dispute. Nancy made abuse allegations against Derek.
She did send me a text a while back saying that if anything happened to her and the kids, that it would be Derek.
Birch says the day before the murders, Nancy gave another neighbor a purple suitcase with some cash, clothing, and her phone. Birch says a note in the suitcase said if something happened to Nancy, Derek was responsible.
Was she trying to make it, seem that he did something? Maybe, but also keep in mind she clearly was mentally unstable.
So the husband was arrested just a week before these murders. He was arrested for domestic violence because he broke in to the home where the mother and the children were living He assaulted the mother, and he took one of the children and was going to leave with them. I understand where the sheriff is definitely hyper-focused on the mother being unstable, and there's been talk of mental issues quite often, but still we've not heard any diagnosed mental issues. I understand that the DHR said that they felt the mother wasn't stable enough to be along with the children. The judge also ordered in the custody that the dad and the mom coordinate living in a camper in the backyard. Something's not sitting well with me. I'm not comfortable that the dad was cleared like within hours. Even though he had been arrested the week before, and even though the neighbors had said that she had recently told them if something happens to her and gave them a suitcase with I would love to know what's in that suitcase. Also her phone. Maybe there was video recordings where she had recorded the husband, or text messages. Who knows? Something was on that phone, because she left it with the neighbors as well. It could have been a burner phone, a second phone. Many women in domestic violence situations, they do have a hidden phone, and that could have been the phone that, was left. And the other neighbor we just saw talk, he said about a month ago she had told him the same thing. So there's a lot going on here. What was her mental diagnosis, if she had one? I know we haven't gotten that far yet in the video. We're going through this together, breaking down this case and learning everything about it. So hopefully by the time this video is over, we're going to know what her diagnosis was. Was it a depression? That is classified as a mental illness. What was it? What was going on here? I'm not comfortable that the husband was ruled out that quickly. Was he brought in? We don't know. Did they check him? Did they do a body audit on him to make sure he had no sort of defensive wounds on him? We don't know. Not at this point anyway. So let's keep going and see what we can find out. Law and Crime actually spoke with Derek on October the 4th. And this is the interview they did with him. I'm not going to play it all. I'm only going to play portions of it. I will link the entire interview down below. It is very interesting. I do suggest going and listening to the interview for yourself in its entirety, but let's listen to just these parts. Also, watch his demeanor. Like, keep in mind, this is October the 4th, and he found his family deceased September the 28th. So this is, about a week, if that, after the fact. Check out his demeanor. Tell me what you think about it.
We're joined now by Derek Johnson, the husband and father who found the disturbing crime scene. And Derek, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're sorry it's under such tragic circumstances.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start really with the basics. How are you holding up right now?
That's a tough question, but I'm doing what I was the day it happened. I will say that.
And I want viewers to know it was actually you who reached out to Law and Crime Network for an interview walking into that home. What do you remember?
So I'll back up just a hair before that. I arrived Wednesday at 4:30 to the house with the RV and was driving from Washington State as ordered by the judge. And that day, the van was in the driveway. All the lights were off. I assumed she had gone somewhere with a friend or something, and she would be dropped off later. I just maintained the house and acted as everything was normal. But when I got up the next day on Thursday, I noticed there was no sounds, there was no movement. All the blinds closed. It was very dark. There was only one light on in the master bedroom, and I had a feeling that I needed to get into the house. And so I ended up drilling out the door lock, French doors in the back. And as I did that, the deadbolt fell to the floor and made a pretty loud sound. I saw my friend, but didn't feel them. I don't know how else to say that. They were there, but I feel them. And I went over to my son and hand on his back to wake him up, and just stiff. I looked in the master bathroom. There was a bathtub of blood. I couldn't handle processing why that was there, other than that shouldn't be there. And then I proceeded to turn the closets towards the master and saw Nancy in a sitting collapsed position, and there was blood on the floor. And after that, I really don't remember much other than went to call 911, and that's all I remember.
I believe it was you and Nancy were estranged, that you'd actually filed for divorce. Can you explain that a bit?
So this is where it gets interesting. So around Christmas, she expressed she wanted divorce, but would not tell me the reasons why. And she struggled to find reasons on the divorce documents to state why she wanted a divorce other than emotional differences. That's where it all she ended up jumping to a self-help clinic, and she hid there for a while. And that's when the state became involved and started realizing that she was having some sort of mental issues, and this was not a stable environment for the children because she had a perfectly safe house and she was not in there. And I wasn't even in the state. Me as a father, I'm supposed to provide a good, loving environment for them and a safe place to live. And so I would rather work on the relationship other than end it. And she took advantage of my love towards her and was able to cancel the divorce, cancel the emergency order through her persuasion through me. And I was stupid and didn't see what she was doing. And she eventually took the children down to Utah, refused to tell me where they were. All I know is that they were at her sister, and I had no info on where that was, and she refused to tell me. I didn't have her sister's contact info. And I hadn't seen them since the day they veered down to Utah around the end of June. I hadn't seen them at all until this last court date on the 20th of September.
Were any domestic violence incidents in the house?
Never. The time anything ever occurred was the 17th of September, where I flew in from Pensacola and drove down here to my house to find a white F-150 I did not recognize, and the locks were different on the house. She had changed them out. So I proceeded to the back side of the house where I'd purposely left a window in case she tried to change the locks out on me. I had a window where she immediately tried to push me out the window, clawed my arms, and told me I needed to go away. She doesn't want me around the children. And I am again. And at that point, I got over the couch, and all I told her, I said, look, I just want to hug my children. You can call the police if you want. I said, I just want to give my son and daughter a hug. I haven't seen them for almost months at that point. And I was taken into jail for 24 hours because it was in their system, even though she's the one who assaulted me and tried pushing me out. But the accusations, I never got to see anything on what she accused me of. All I know, it was 17 pages long, and she did it when she was hiding the children in Utah. She is not, during this time, she is not the same person that I married, and everything I am 100% started during the beginning of the pandemic, and she didn't have, and she put it above family life is the biggest thing. She would not get off her phone. It was constant social media.
What are the early stages of the investigation? Were you looped in on any of that?
That's really interesting. So I had communication with the detective. I was, taken down to their administrative building, gave my statements on what I found and happened. Then I was driven to a hotel room where I stayed until they released the crime scene. And I think it was to leave someone in a hotel room unmonitored after they just 3 family members. I mean, that's like setting someone up. I know I would never, ever hurt myself, but I know other people are not as stable as me, but at least someone check on you. I only had the church checking on me, and that's the biggest thing during times is having someone check on you and making sure okay. I always cooperated with them. I've been given updates, but not much, and they have just told me it's still ongoing. There's still things that are Nancy's possessions and her phone and various clothing. She had taken a backpack or a luggage bag over to the neighbors, I believe it was Wednesday, and told one of the neighbors, if anything happens to me, it was my husband. And that was very strange because that was the phone that she shut off and I wasn't even home yet.
Why she did this, because she wouldn't let me in and she wouldn't let anyone else in when it came to what he was thinking. She had shut everyone out and put a face on to everyone that everything was okay.
Well, the raw emotion there coming tonight, this is in regards to the murder of 2 young children in Semmes, an update to a story we've been following.
Nancy Johnson's estranged husband and her brothers grasping for answers in the wake of the Mobile County Sheriff's Office conclusion that she drowned her 2 young children and then hanged herself last week.
She loved her children so much. That's the thing that I watch, is her rationality on how to love your children just disappeared. It has a combination to do with all the conspiracy theories that went out there. It has a combination to do with all the lockdowns. It just compounded on her, and it got worse and worse, and she never let it go.
And court records show that the 39-year-old woman flew to Utah and persuaded a judge to sign a protection from abuse order against Derek Johnson. He says it was all a tactic to gain custody of the children.
Plain and simple. I never have done that. I've always been there for them. Never have made a home environment that's hazardous or chaotic for them or dangerous. Always been a protective father.
Nancy Johnson's brother, Freddie and James Leon, said that they just can't believe she would ever have harmed her
sister. And I am sure she will never do anything to harm her children. She was worried about the safety of her kids.
Nancy, and we know her very well, very well. She was a very strong woman. She has a very protective network of family.
Derek Johnson says that he'll need at least a month to determine what he'll do next, whether that's moving back to Washington State or trying to pick up the pieces here. The sheriff, meanwhile, has said that he's looking into possible systemic failures and is asking why child welfare authorities didn't intervene.
And he wasn't ready to speak with us last week, but he opened with us today. He said he spent the weekend in tears, still in shock, trying to still process what happened.
I'm dead inside, and I've cried all weekend, and I just feel sick. I opened the door. I noticed Mia and Jacob were laying on the couch with blankets on them, and I walked over to Jacob and put my hand on his back to try to wake him up, and he was stiff as a board. He had foam coming out of his mouth. And I walked over to Mia. She had foam coming out of her mouth, and I walked into the master, and there was a bathtub full of blood.
Derek believes what led up to the tragedy is a result of ongoing marital issues that he noticed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I feel lost now. I have nothing, absolutely nothing, and I don't know how I'm going to recover. I don't know. I just know I'm going to miss them all.
Investigators believe Nancy Johnson drowned her children, then hanged herself inside the Semmes home either late Wednesday or early Thursday morning last week. Her estranged husband and the children's father, Derek Johnson, made the horrific discovery. He spoke to NBC 15 News yesterday about finding Jacob and Mia on the living room sectional couch.
He was just stiff like a board, and that's when I started to panic.
Derek filed for divorce in Mobile County in August, 2 days after Nancy accused him of domestic violence, and a judge in Utah issued this protection order. Derek accused Nancy of taking the children without his consent out of state. Nancy returned with the children to Alabama to appear before Mobile County Circuit Court Judge Walter Honeycutt for a September 20th custody hearing. According to this visitation order Honeycutt issued 2 days before the children's bodies were found, Nancy and Derek agreed to alternate custody weeks. A source familiar with the case tells NBC 15 News after this visitation order was issued, Honeycutt had a conference call with the judge in Utah, then set an emergency hearing Thursday, September 28th. At that hearing, the source tells us Honeycutt verbally ordered DHR to remove the children from the home, citing safety concerns. The sheriff's office also confirms Honeycutt gave the verbal order. There is no written order submitted in the court record explaining the reasoning. After the hearing, they learned about the murder-suicide. Derek says Nancy was struggling with her mental health, which started to decline during the pandemic. He says she became consumed with conspiracy theories.
It started all with QAnon, and I would get phone calls at work from her saying there's going to be blackouts, that, we need to have a meeting point, and she got bad. And then she went from one thing to another and just kept jumping to all sorts of things online, and she couldn't see it was taking over family life. It was taking over everything that was important, and it just continued, and she refused to get any sort of help. She refused to let any sort of person intervene in our relationship because she claimed they had no business in it. And you can't force someone to go get help.
Derek says his Mormon faith is what's getting him through this very difficult time. There's a GoFundMe his family set up to help him financially as well.
One thing that really stands out to me is he had said that the phone that she gave to the neighbor, along with the suitcase and money and everything else that she gave, he said that she had had that phone turned off. Okay, so again, that makes me wonder, is that a phone that didn't have service on it, but maybe she was using it to record video? It does make me wonder. Obviously, there's something going on here that the police department has completely ruled him out as a suspect or anything else. And as you saw earlier, he was almost ruled out immediately. It happened on the 28th, and by the press conference on the 29th, the sheriff was saying, oh no, he didn't do anything. I don't know. I'm not going to accuse this guy of doing anything, but his demeanor, this photo you're seeing here is literally 3 to 4 days after the fact. He doesn't have red puppy. I mean, I know everyone grieves differently. I get that. But this is very differently. I don't know. I almost feel Chris Watts vibes from the sky. All kinds of different things, Him talking about her being on social media all the time. Him saying that the reason she wanted a divorce was because of an emotional situation. He also did nonchalantly bring up that the week before, when she had to have him arrested, that she had clawed his arms. So he had claw marks on his arms. And this is a week before. So I'm sure those sores would still be there, right? You see what I mean? And he was asked several times, was there any domestic violence or any kind of thing like that in the home? He absolutely says no, except for the one time he was arrested. And then he goes on to say why it was her fault that even happened, and he was only trying to hug his son. Okay, that is an inconsistency, because we've already heard the police department say that they're very familiar with these people. They've only lived there 6 months, and they've already had 6 to 8 calls just recently on them. She did go to Utah with the kids, and that is where she did get her protection order. It does make me wonder, did she go to Utah to stay with her sister? And it's odd that he doesn't know where her sister lives, doesn't know how to get a hold of her sister. I mean, this is his sister-in-law, right? but he don't know how to get a hold of anybody with his wife and kids there. Why did she go there for a few months with the kids? It almost sounds like, and this is just me speculating, but it almost sounds to me like she was trying to get away from him, like she was scared of him. I mean, given what she told neighbors at least a month prior, because the one neighbor said that she told him that about a month ago. So, and then when he said he tried to get in the house, she was just clawing him. I don't know, y'all. Something doesn't set well. Not only did the DHR fail these children, I'm worried that the judicial system itself is not looking into this case as much as they should. Like, they must have some hardcore, solid evidence to show that he had nothing at all to do with this. To have ruled him out that quickly, I don't know. Y'all let me know what you think about it. Drop them in the comment box below, and we will continue to follow this case. That's really about all there is out on it to date, but maybe we'll be hearing something more, and I do believe we will. I haven't really went into their social media accounts, and you know, I haven't deep dove it that far. Pulled up legal documents. I haven't done all that, but I'm going to. And I will bring them to you as I pull them up. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think below. And until next time, this is Unjustified. Thank you so much for watching, and do not forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave us a comment below your thoughts of this video. And until next time, this is Unjustified.